Bangladesh is the size of the US state of Iowa. It holds 173 million people, more than half of America. If America had this density, every American would fit inside the state of Arizona. The rest of the country would be empty. How does it work? It shouldn't. The land floods every year. The rivers keep redrawing the map. And yet, Bangladesh feeds itself. It built a $3.6 billion bridge with its own money. Its capital is more populous than Canada. This is not a country that survives crowding. It is built from it. In this video, we'll show you how. Most people think they know Bangladesh, a flat plain. Endless rice paddies, floods. They are not wrong, but that is not where this country begins. It begins at the easternmost edge, in jungle hills the rest of the country does not picture. Bandarban. The name means dam of monkeys, after the troops that once crossed the streams in shapes the locals mistook for a structure. Here, the land lifts in folds. Saka Hapong rises to 1,064 metres, the highest peak in Bangladesh. Mountaineers called it the Everest of Bangladesh, not for height, but for what it represents, a country no one expects to have summits at all. 15 indigenous peoples live across these hills. The Maru hold what may be the youngest religion in Bangladesh, Krama, less than a century old. Some of their languages have fewer than 5,000 speakers. The Sangu River, which carves through this district, is the only river in the entire country whose source lies inside Bangladesh itself. Every other river begins somewhere else and arrives. On a hill above the valley sits the Buddha Datu Jadi, the golden Buddhist temple. Built in 1995 by a Marma monk. Its gold roof curves in the Burmese style, holding the largest seated Buddha in Bangladesh. A reminder that this country, 89% Muslim, has corners where Buddhism is the everyday practice, not a memory. South of these hills, the land falls into water. Rangamati is the only district in Bangladesh that shares borders with two foreign countries, India to the north, Myanmar to the east. And in its heart lies a lake that should not exist. Kaptai is the largest artificial lake in Bangladesh. Born in 1961, from East Pakistan's first hydroelectric dam. It still produces 230 megawatts. It also flooded 54,000 acres of farmland, displaced 100,000 people, and submerged 40% of the cultivable land of the Chakma, the largest indigenous group in the country. The old palace of the Chakma kings lies somewhere beneath the surface. Each dry season, when the water recedes, fragments of walls reappear briefly like Atlantis. The Chakma have a word for what happened. Boro Parang, the Great Exodus. Out of it, in 1972 came an armed insurgency that lasted 26 years. The peace accord signed in 1997 still hasn't been fully implemented by 2026. Higher, in the same district, sits Sarjik Valley, 1,800 feet above sea level, 8 kilometres from the Mizoram border. The army took 10 years to build the road. Among its few thousand inhabitants is a community of around 1,000 Lushai Christians, descendants converted by Welsh missionaries in the 1890s. Across the next ridge live their cousins in India, families split by a border they did not draw. Every layer here is built on something that was buried. Move west, and the hills fall away into water again. But this time, the water doesn't only rise from the ground here. It falls from clouds that form on the Indian side of the border. Sylhet sits at the foot of Meghalaya, the Indian state across the border that holds Cherrapunji, one of the wettest places on Earth. When the monsoon breaks over those hills, the water comes here. The Surma River, which begins in Manipur and crosses into Bangladesh at Zakiganj, Swelwer. The Haws, vast freshwater wetlands, return. In dry season, Tangwa Haw is rice paddies. In monsoon, it is an inland sea, 100 square kilometres of open water with only the tops of villages above it. Each winter, 80,000 migratory birds arrive from Siberia, Tibet and Mongolia, including the Bear's pochard duck, of which fewer than 1,000 exist on the planet. Further upstream, the River Piayin runs emerald green where it meets the limestone of the Khasi Hills at Bichanakandi. The mineral water and the 7 layers of distant Indian ridges create one of the strangest sights in the country. In 2022, Sylhet's flood broke the 122-year record. 4 million people were displaced. But Sylhet has another flood, outward. 95% of the British Bangladeshi diaspora trace their roots here. The remittance from London and the Gulf, over $5 billion a year, is a quarter of the entire country's. Beneath Sylhet's tea hills lies 60% of Bangladesh's natural gas. Everything sits on top of something. Across the great river that the Sylhet flood sends south, and the land flattens into the alluvial plain. Here lies the oldest layer of Bangladesh that humans have written down. Bagura, the district whose name comes from a Muslim governor's son in the 13th century, but whose ground holds something far older. Just outside the modern city, the citadel of Mahastangara stands 6 metres above the surrounding fields. It has stood in some form since the 3rd century before Christ. The city it crowned was called Pandranagara, and it remained occupied continuously for more than 1,000 years. In 1931, archaeologists found a Brahmi-inscribed limestone tablet here. It is the oldest piece of writing yet discovered in Bangladesh, ordering grain to be distributed during a famine in the time of Emperor Ashoka. The Chinese monk Xuanzang came through here in the year 639, finding an international centre of Buddhist learning. The river that once made it possible, the Karatoya, was, according to medieval texts, 3 times the size of the Ganges. It is now a small stream. When the river left, the city emptied. But the layer remained. 60 kilometres north, the Buddhist story Xuanzang witnessed reached its peak 2 centuries after his journey. At Pahapur, in Nayogaon, stands Somapura Mahavihara, the largest Buddhist monastery in all of South Asia. Built at the end of the 8th century by King Dharmapala of the Pala dynasty, it covers 11 hectares. A perfect square, 280 metres on each side, ringed by 177 monastic cells facing inward toward a cruciform temple that once rose 21 metres above the courtyard. From here, the layout travelled. The Ananda Temple at Pagan in Myanmar, Lorojong Grang at Java, Shandi Sewu. The great temples of Cambodia. They all carry the geometry first drawn in this Bangladesh field. It became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1985. The foundations of Buddhist Asia rest in a Bangladesh field, in a country where Islam would not become dominant for another 500 years. The Pala dynasty fell. The Sena replaced them. The British arrived. And the alluvial plain became something else again, the most productive piece of soil in the country. Rajshahi sits on the north bank of the Padma, the name the Ganges takes when it crosses into Bangladesh. The city has many titles. Silk City for 3 kinds of silk produced almost nowhere else in the country, exported to 30 nations. Mango capital for Langra, Fazli, Kirsapat, and the geographical indication that protects them. 20 kilometres north, the Kansat Mango Bazaar handles 49% of the entire country's mango production. 1,000 trucks leave it every day during the 2-month harvest window. In 2016, the World Health Organization praised Rajshahi for cutting its PM10 by 67% in 2 years. It became, briefly, the cleanest city in South Asia. The same city had, 10 years earlier, watched police shoot 17 farmers in nearby Kansat protesting power cuts that left the mango harvest to rot. And the Padma, the river that made all of it, is taking it back. Between 2015 and 2022, the river swallowed more than 50 villages from this bank. Bangladesh has another name for them: climate refugees from before the term existed. The Padma keeps moving south, and where it spreads into a fan of channels, the land becomes water and the water becomes road. This is Barisal, the Venice of Bengal, where the canal map is more useful than the highway map. Each summer morning at Swarupkathi, hundreds of wooden boats fill the Kirtankola and its tributaries, piled with guavas. The region produces 80% of Bangladesh's guavas, which locals call the apple of Bengal. The floating market has run for more than a century. Nearby, on a different schedule, a market sells the boats themselves, handmade dinghies and country craft traded weekly during the monsoon months. South, at the country's edge, the beach at Kwakadasi stretches 18 kilometres. Locals call it Sagar Kanya, daughter of the sea. It is one of the very few places on Earth where sunrise and sunset can both be watched from the same patch of sand. A community of Rakhine Buddhists has lived along this coast for 2.5 centuries, having fled Burma in 1784. Out at sea, in the 19th century, sailors reported a sound, distant cannon fire from no visible source. The Barisal guns, no one has explained them. The poet Jibanananda Das, who was born here and shaped modern Bengali verse, would have heard them on the water. But the overnight ferries that once carried thousands from Dhaka, 4 decks high, 12 hours upriver, are quieter now. A bridge has taken the road. The Padma and Meghna meet here. So does the Jamuna, the name the Brahmaputra takes when it crosses into the country. 3 of the largest rivers in South Asia converge in the small district of Munshiganj. Together, they pour into the Bay of Bengal enough sediment to lock away as much as 15% of the world's seabed carbon. The Ganges delta they shape is the largest river delta on the planet. At its lower mouth, the Meghna grows wider than the bay it pours into. What humans built here, the rivers tend to take. 1,000 years ago, the kingdom of Bikrampur stood on these banks. From it came Atish Dipankar, the Buddhist scholar who carried Mahayana doctrine to Tibet in the 11th century, where it survives to this day. The medieval kingdom is gone. The river that swallowed it has a name in Mughal records: Kirtanasha, destroyer of fame. It still moves, still feeds on villages, still rearranges the map. 2 of the world's last 4 freshwater dolphin species still hunt in this silty water, the Ganges and the Irrawaddy. By the time the rivers do their work, by the time the silt has built up another field, another village, another bank of land, Bangladesh has run out of room. And all the room it doesn't have is collected somehow in one city. Dhaka. The most densely urbanised city on the planet by built-up area. Its metropolitan population, petered by 2024 estimates, has crossed 36.5 million, more people than Canada. In the core neighbourhoods of Old Dhaka, the average density reaches 47,000 people per square kilometre. 14 times denser than New York. The streets cannot grow. Only 7% of the city's surface is given to roads. The result is mathematical. The average vehicle speed in Dhaka has fallen from 21 kilometres an hour in 2007 to under 5 in 2023. It is now slower to drive across this city than to walk across it. The traffic costs the economy $3 billion a year. To move through Dhaka at all, the city built one of the largest fleets of human-powered transport in human history. 1.1 million cycle rickshaws cross the city every day, the most of any city ever recorded. They have their own painted folk art, recognised by UNESCO in 2023 as intangible cultural heritage. The commuter trains do not have room for everyone. Passengers hang from the doors, climb onto the roofs. At least 100 die each year, falling. Dhaka does not slow down. It simply absorbs the loss. Half the reason for Dhaka's existence runs through it. The Buriganga, Old Ganges, in literal Bengali, is only 29 kilometres long. But in 1610, when the Mughal governor Subadar Islam Khan Chishti needed a place from which to control the trade of Bengal, the river decided it. He chose this bend. The empire followed. For 2 centuries, the Buriganga was Dhaka's mirror. Mughal Subadars hung lanterns from 1,000 boats every evening. European merchants, Portuguese, French, Dutch, Armenian, called the place the Venice of the East. The river held the city the way a hand holds water. Today, the river is one of the most polluted on Earth. Each day, Dhaka pours into it 4,500 tonnes of solid waste and 21,000 cubic metres of toxic effluent from the leather tanneries. Dissolved oxygen has fallen to 3 milligrams per litre, well below the 5 required for aquatic life. In 2022, the High Court of Bangladesh ruled the Buriganga a legal person, with the right to be defended, and by 2026, no agency has enforced it, and yet the river is still working. At Sadarghat, the city dock, in literal Bengali, between 30,000 and 50,000 passengers leave or arrive every day. 45 regular launch routes connect Dhaka to almost every southern district. 4 paddle steamers, built in Calcutta and Glasgow between 1929 and 1950 still run from this pier to Khulna. The rocket fleet, among the last commercial paddle steamers anywhere on the planet. Yet the city stacks even its centuries. A few hundred metres from the pier, the labyrinth begins. Old Dhaka, the Mughal city, renamed Jahangirnagar in 1608 after the emperor, is the densest urban tract on Earth. 1.15 square kilometres, 887,000 residents. The math gives 770,000 people per square kilometre. Nowhere on the planet is more crowded. This was once the richest city in the East. Its product was muslin, a cotton woven so fine that a sari could be threaded through a wedding ring. Marie Antoinette ordered it from across an ocean. When the East India Company took the city in 1757, the answer was not to compete. It was to remove the labour. By many accounts, British officials cut off the thumbs of the master weavers. The thread broke. The industry never recovered. The Mughals are gone, but their layout holds. Within the maze stand the pink palace of the last Nawab, the first building in Dhaka to receive electric light, and the unfinished Mughal fort, whose princess died inside its walls. The stacking doesn't stop at the edge. In a neighbouring district, the 201 Dome Mosque carries 201 domes, said to be the most of any mosque in the world. Its central minaret, at 138 metres, stands taller than any minaret in South Asia. Elsewhere east of the city, the Lokanath ashram around the tomb of a Bengali Hindu saint draws hundreds of thousands of pilgrims each year. In a country 89% Muslim, the layers do not erase. They sit on top of one another. Above the city, a different stack is rising. In 2022, Bangladesh inaugurated the Padma Bridge, 6.5 kilometres across the river that destroys empires. It is the longest in the country and carries roads on its upper deck, trains on its lower. Its foundation piles plunge 127 metres into the riverbed, the deepest bridge piles ever driven on Earth. The story behind it became the country's parable. In 2012, the World Bank withdrew a $1.2 billion pledge over corruption allegations. Other lenders followed. Sheikh Hasina announced the country would build it itself. Bangladesh paid $3.6 billion from its own budget. On opening day, the bridge carried more national feeling than steel. Above Dhaka, a second concrete spine has risen. The Dhaka Elevated Expressway, completed in 2025. 4 lanes raised on pillars over the gridlocked streets. The airport drive, once 2 hours, now takes 30 minutes. At the other end of that drive sits Hazrat Shah Jalal International, the airport named for the Sufi saint who brought Islam to Sylhet 7 centuries ago. Its new third terminal, opened in late 2023, tripled the country's air capacity overnight. 500,000 Bangladeshi workers leave through it every year, bound for the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the Emirates, Malaysia. The wages they send home make up almost a quarter of the country's foreign exchange. The new layer goes on top, even when the old one cannot be cleared. Beneath all the new concrete is the same patch of ground. The racecourse ground, now renamed Suhrawadi Udyan. But the same lawn sits beside Dhaka University, Tissa. It is where the country was conceived and where most of it nearly died. On the 7th of March, 1971, before a crowd of 1 million people, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman spoke without notes for 18 minutes. He said the struggle this time was the struggle for liberation. UNESCO has since added the speech to its Memory of the World Register, one of the few 20th century speeches it has so honoured. The country's national football stadium across the city bears his honorific Bangabandhu, Friend of Bengal. 18 days later, on the night of March 25th, the Pakistan Army launched Operation Searchlight. By morning, several hundred had been killed in these dormitories alone, thousands more across the city that night. By December, between 300,000 and 3 million Bangladeshis had been killed across the country. 200,000 to 400,000 women had been raped. On the 14th of December, 2 days before victory, the army went house to house and executed 200 intellectuals, professors, doctors, journalists, artists. Bangladesh was born 2 days later. Already in mourning, it learned the cost of language much earlier. On the 21st of February 1952, 5 students were shot in this same district for demanding that Bengali be made an official tongue. UNESCO marks the day as International Mother Language Day. Bangladesh is the only country in the world whose international holiday is for words. The lawn does not look different. The layer remembers. South of the city, the rivers fan out again, and this time they meet the sea. What grows in the brackish water between is the largest unbroken mangrove forest on the planet. 10,277 square kilometres divided between Bangladesh and India. Bangladesh holds 60% of it. The forest is named for the Sundari tree that defines its canopy. UNESCO inscribed it in 1997. This is the only mangrove forest in the world where tigers live. About 114 of them in the Bangladeshi half, the highest density of Bengal tigers anywhere. They swim between the islands, they hunt fish, crabs, and monitor lizards. And they kill humans more often than any other tiger population on Earth, 50 to 60 people every year. One theory blames the salty water and lack of calcium for the change in temperament. Honey collectors, the Mawali, wear masks reversed on the back of their heads. The tiger usually strikes from behind, the legend says, and the false face confuses it. The hunters themselves are also hunted. In 2019, Bangladeshi forest police killed 4 men in a firefight defending tigers from poachers. 4 million people live off this forest for fish, prawns, honey and timber. Twice in this century, in 2007 and 2020, cyclones tore in from the Bay of Bengal, and the Sundarbans absorbed them, sparing perhaps 100,000 human lives. The forest has its own god. Bombibida, the Lady of the Forest, is worshipped by both Hindus and Muslims who pray to her before entering her. There is no other deity in South Asia who unites the two faiths the way fear of the tiger does. East, along the coast from the Sundarbans, the mangroves thin out and a different kind of shore takes over. Chittagong, the country's second city and the largest container port on the Bay of Bengal. 90% of Bangladesh's foreign trade passes through here. Portuguese traders named it Porto Grande in the 16th century. The British found it, so did, more recently, the ships. Along the beach at Sitakunda, 18 kilometres north of the city, the world's second largest shipbreaking yard runs continuously. About a fifth of the planet's decommissioned vessels are pulled apart on this strip of sand. So 200,000 workers cut, dismantle, and salt away what they can. Roughly half of Bangladesh's steel comes from these wrecks. The work is brutal. Between 2009 and 2018, at least 249 workers died on the beach. The average life expectancy in the trade is 40, so the industry was an accident. In 1960, a Greek freighter named the MD Alpine ran aground in a storm and could not be moved. For 5 years, it sat in the sand. Locals stripped it. A company bought what was left. The country's billion-dollar ship-breaking economy was born from one ship that could not leave. Under the river now runs a tunnel, opened in 2023, the first under-river tunnel in South Asia. The Karnafuli, which begins in the Indian state of Mizoram, has been hollowed beneath itself. Further south, the longest stretch of natural beach in the world begins. Cox's Bazar, 120 kilometres of unbroken sand, longer than the celebrated beaches of Brazil or Australia. 5 million Bangladeshis visit it every year. Most of the country has stood on this sand at least once. The name is not a coincidence. In 1799, the East India Company sent Captain Hiram Cox to settle a refugee crisis. A Burmese king had invaded the kingdom of Arakan in 1784, and the dispossessed people who had fled into Bengal needed land. Cox arrived to allocate it. He died here before he finished. The market built in his memory became Cox's Bazaar, Cox's Market, and the name has held for more than 2 centuries. It is the same crisis, the same border, the same flight. The Rohingya have been crossing into this coast in waves since before the British knew what to do. 28 kilometres inland from the tourist beach, past a checkpoint and over a low ridge, lies the largest refugee camp on earth. Kutupalong Balukali, 33 settlements collapsed into one. One million people, 24 square kilometres. Run the math, and Kutupalong is 1.5 times denser than Dhaka, already the most densely urbanised city on the planet. This is the densest edge of the densest country in the world. Around 54 people share each latrine. It became this size in August 2017. Over 12 weeks, 700,000 Rohingya crossed the border on foot, fleeing a military campaign that the United States and the Netherlands have since labelled genocide. Aid agencies had estimated 75,000. They were off by a factor of 10. The United Nations called the wave a tsunami of people. The camp does not stop being a place where the world's worst things happen. Endangered Asian elephants migrate through what was once their forest and have killed 13 Rohingya in the camps. In 2020, Cyclone Amphan, the strongest storm ever recorded in the Bay of Bengal, came close enough that warning sirens reached the highest level. It turned aside at the last hour. Across the border, the Myanmar military still sends men in civilian clothes into the camps, recruiting young Rohingya back to a war they fled. In January 2025, the United States froze its share of the camp's aid. In September 2024, Bangladesh opened a new railway from Dhaka. It does not stop at Kutupalong. At Tikanath, the southernmost peninsula of Bangladesh, the mainland ends. 8 kilometres offshore lies the only coral island Bangladesh has. St. Martin's. 8 square kilometres at low tide, 5 at high. To Bengali sailors, it is Coconut Island. To Arab traders, simply the island. The English name belongs to a colonial officer who came late. Coral fossils on the island have been dated to 33,000 years ago. 5 millennia ago, this was still part of the Teknaf Peninsula. The rising sea cut it off. Then the southern half of it rose again about 450 years ago. In 2012, the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea ruled the island and its waters belong to Bangladesh. 3 years later, The country began counting the damage tourism had done. Coral cover halved in 2 decades. Hatchling sea turtles down 80%. In February 2025, it closed itself to visitors for 9 months a year. The smallest part of Bangladesh now spends most of the year asking to be alone. From the only mountains Bangladesh admits to having, to the only coral island that survived the rising sea. From a forest of tigers to a city that absorbs the loss. From a market that runs on guavas to a refugee camp that holds 1 million people. From a Buddhist monastery that built half of Asia to a country not yet 60 years old. This is a place where the world stacks itself on top of itself. 3 of South Asia's great rivers, 1 delta, 6 seasons in 1 calendar year. 47,000 people per square kilometre in the average neighbourhood. 770,000 at the densest. And in the south, 1 million more, 1.5 times again. In 2024, students again gathered on the lawn beside Dhaka University. The government fell within weeks. Bangladesh asked Muhammad Yunus, Nobel laureate for inventing microcredit, to come home. He was 84. Bangladesh is not, as the world keeps saying, an overpopulated country. It is a country in which every layer of life waits to lean on the one below. It is not the crisis. What the world calls a crisis, this country has been turning into architecture for 1,000 years.